Hey, everybody. Glad that you're here tonight. A lot to talk about. Things have taken an interesting turn in the last 24 hours, so to speak. We'll be talking about what's going on with this. A lot to say. But anyhow, glad you're here. Let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Glad that you're here. We're going to have just a normal late night chat like we always do. It's almost sunset here in New York City. I'm in my lovely Brooklyn apartment with my lovely bookshelf behind me. The way we do these chats, for those of you who may not be familiar, is I give my opening remarks. That's just whatever it is I'm going to talk about. Then from there, we do a roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who's watching. And then after that, I answer your questions for the rest of the night. So if you got something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, send a Rumble rant on the Rumble or send a YouTube super chat on the YouTube. Good stuff. Good stuff. Answering questions in the second half of the show is what makes this fun. Often my answers are, random and it's much more conversational, off the cuff. It's a lot of fun. So that's the way it works. Couple quick announcements. We do have morning messages. Hold on. We do have morning messages every morning. On the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. Right? Center for Political Innovation is the organization, the education project that I am part of. We've been organizing and publishing books and doing great work for a long time. And every morning on our YouTube channel, we have a morning message from a member. And those morning messages are to give you hope and inspiration throughout the day. You hear from a different member of our group. So I would encourage you to go and sign up so that you can listen to them. Go and sign up, right? It's a great thing to do. Tomorrow's morning message is going to be here. Okay. Just trying to, it's not letting me put the, right? There we go. Right. So yeah, there we go. There's one tomorrow that'll be in. Right. So enjoy it. It's just a great way that we support each other in the Center for Political Innovation community. It's just something that we do. So there you go. There's that. That's what we got going on. Yeah, like I said, these streams, I give opening remarks, then we do the roll call, and then I answer your questions. So any questions that you got, send me a super chat, send me a Rumble rant, and I'll answer it in the second half of the show. So, folks, a lot has happened in the last 24 hours. Last night I streamed, and I let you all know that this book was removed from Amazon. And last night, around 6:37-ish, they emailed me and they said that there was an issue with the cover of this book. They said it was an issue with the cover and that I had multiple options. One of my options was to remove the cover. They claimed that the cover was copyrighted. Well, the cover is not copyrighted because it was designed by Arthur Porter. He's credited on the back of the book with being the cover designer. And he edited all of this together, and there were multiple versions of it. So this is not a copyrighted design. This is legit. Regardless, they gave me the option of just deleting it. So I made a new cover. that was a completely blank cover. It followed one of their Amazon templates, and I uploaded it. And so then I checked this morning to see if, to see if the new cover had been able to go through. And it didn't. And it was if I had never submitted it, which I thought was rather odd. So I submitted it again. And then within an hour, it came back as if I had never submitted it. And so not only did they remove my book, which they did, in addition to that, they will not let me upload it. Once again, the official reason they removed my book was the cover. I removed the cover, gave it a completely bland cover, and they will not let me put it back on there. Now, this book is not new. I published this book in September of 2020. This book has been in print for 4 years. So if at any point there was an issue with the cover, that should have been addressed 4 years ago. Now the book is no longer on Amazon. Now it's on Lulu. So there's a link down below. It's available on Lulu. I'll drop the link in the chat too, if you want to order it on Lulu. And it's selling pretty well on Lulu. And it's got a generic cover, but it's the same interior, and it's on Lulu. If you want to get it on Lulu, you can get it on Lulu. And last night I made a special offer regarding the book, and that offer still stands. And that offer is that if you want the PDF of the book, you want me to send you the PDF, the ebook of it. All you need to do is, I'll deal with that later. But I have an arrangement where I'll just email you the PDF if you don't want to order a physical copy from Lulu. But this blew up pretty big. Jimmy Dore tweeted about this. Max Blumenthal tweeted about this. I'm scheduled to go on a few shows in the coming weeks to talk about my book on Kamala Harris. Okay. I'm happy about this. And I got a few things to say about this book. First of all, this book is not a partisan hit piece. I'm above that. All right. And I will tell you more about the contents of the book later. But if you have one of these, by the way, if you have one of these copies, hold on to it, because you're holding a collector's item. Because this Amazon edition of the book that's been out for 4 years is no more. So you have a collector's item if you have an original of these. But yeah, this book isn't just a partisan hit piece about Kamala Harris. It's pretty negative on Kamala Harris, but the focus isn't really Kamala Harris. I mean, the focus, I use Kamala Harris to make 3 political points. So tonight on this stream, I'm going to tell you how I came to write this book, why I wrote it, etc. And we'll just talk about where this book came from, this book that is now the center of attention. I'm getting Trump podcasts are reaching out to me. I'm scheduled to go on a couple shows already, possibly even more shows. This is blowing up, and I'll take it. I'm happy that this is getting attention, and it is ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous for Amazon to ban this book. Absolutely ridiculous for Amazon to ban this book, because this book I wrote as an American citizen about my concerns about the woman who was the vice presidential candidate of the Democrat Party in 2020. And I knew about her, and I did the research, and everything in this book that is stated as fact is backed up according to sources. I don't have any special information. It's not available in public places. I cite the research of Reason Magazine. I cite Kamala Harris's autobiography. I cite the essay of her father. Everything in this book that is stated as fact is verified. And on top of that, right, I expect there will be, I'm going to see how big this blows up, right? The fact that, I'm already going on shows about this, and it's the Lulu edition is selling like crazy. And this all seems to make me believe that this is going to get a lot of attention. And when it does, they're going to bring up the fact that I work at RT, which I do. Very proud of the work that I do at RT. They're going to talk about the fact that I have met Russian President Vladimir Putin, which I have, and I've talked to him. And they're going to bring that up. But I got to tell you, no Russian had anything to do with making this book what it is. I did not get permission from RT to publish this book. They did not go over any of the contents with me. And if I had gone to them, they probably would have tried to stop me from publishing this book. So this book is not a Russian conspiracy against Kamala Harris to affect the elections. I wrote it 4 years ago because we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I had met somebody who knew Kamala Harris's father, and I started doing the research, and I felt I had to write this book. And my heart and soul is in this book. Again, this is not a partisan hit piece, right? I mean, I'm above that, right? I don't do campaigning. You know, I mean, this book, 133 pages, this book says 3 things. It is 3 pieces about Kamala Harris and what we can learn from her life. And I will tell you the contents of this book later, but I'm very proud of this. This is one of the best books I've ever written. I've written a variety of different books over the years. This is probably, I would say this is one of my best. And this book says 3 things that really need to be said, and it uses Kamala Harris to make that point. And I'm very proud of this book. So I'm going to tell you how I came to write this book. I'm just going to tell you how I came to write it. I want to show you a picture. That is a picture from the year of 2011. And anyone who's ever been to New York City, been to the Wall Street area, will recognize that. That is Trinity Church, which is right near Wall Street. And if you look at the guy standing behind the banner with the beard and the long hair, you can't see me very clearly. I'm kind of, much of my face is covered or by that pink sign. The guy whose face is kind of covered by the pink sign, that's me. And this was 2011. This was during the Occupy Wall Street protests. And I was all right. I was part of the Occupy Wall Street protests. And, I was part of the Occupy Wall Street protests. I was a young man. I got interested in communism when I was a teenager. And when I was in college, I joined the Workers' World Party, which was a communist group. And I was involved in a lot of protests against police brutality and for workers' rights. I worked with death row inmates and prisoners. I gave classes. I put up posters. I sold newspapers. And, after college, I couldn't find a job. There had been the financial crisis, but I moved to New York City. And the Workers' World Party, they worked with the former U.S. Attorney General Ramsey Clark. Ramsey Clark was the Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson. And I worked with Ramsey Clark. Here, let me show you the picture. Ramsey Clark, he was the Attorney General under Lyndon Johnson. And I worked with him, and the Workers' World Party, they ran a nonprofit, an NGO that they ran that was called the International Action Center. And I was a staffer for the International Action Center. And I didn't get paid at all. I barely survived. But I was a full-time staffer for the International Action Center. And that's Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General, and that's me. And then that guy standing next to me, that was my roommate at the time, who was another communist. And I worked for Ramsey Clark, and Ramsey Clark was an anti-war activist. And during the Occupy Wall Street protests, when I had my long hair and my beard, I went to the Occupy Wall Street protests to represent the Workers' World Party and the International Action Center. And I was involved in, promoting an anti-imperialist and an anti-war message during the Occupy Wall Street protests. In fact, there's a clip of me from the Occupy Wall Street protest that's actually in a lot of documentaries. It's in at least a few of the Occupy Wall Street documentaries that have come out. It's from the first General Assembly they had of Occupy Wall Street, August 2nd, 2011. I went down there, and there was a bit of a scuffle, I guess, between the Workers' World Party members and some of the anarchist hippies or whatever. But that was the first day, or the first General Assembly of Occupy Wall Street, August 2nd, 2011. And I'm waiting for the video to download, but we went down there, and I took the microphone. We had a sound permit, and I took the microphone. It was by the Bull on Wall Street, and I gave an anti-imperialist speech. And I will, as soon as it finishes downloading, I will put that very brief clip. I'm just telling you who I am and how I came to write this book, because it's important, right? I'm not a partisan Trump hack by any means. I'm an anti-imperialist, and I've been an anti-imperialist for a long time. And I do work for RT, but before RT ever paid me a cent, I was doing anti-imperialist work. And it's because of my anti-imperialist work that I came to write this book. And so I'll show you what I was doing during Occupy Wall Street. And this is a clip. It's in a number of the documentaries about Occupy Wall Street. There's a film called Owned and Operated. There's a number of clips where I'm used as kind of the villain, the hardline authoritarian communist that they didn't want at Occupy Wall Street. That's what I was. I had my long hair and my beard. I was much more of a hippie and much more of a traditional leftist in those years than I am now. But I was at Occupy Wall Street, and I sold newspapers. And, I was a young person. I was from Ohio. I'm from a very small town in Ohio. I grew up in a very religious, conservative area. But in high school, I got interested in communism. Well, younger than that, really. But I got very interested in communist groups when I was in high school. In college, I joined the Workers' World Party. They moved me to New York. I was a staffer for the International Action Center of Ramsey Clark. And when the Occupy Wall Street protests happened in 2011, I didn't miss them. I was a big part of it. And this is me, 2011. I will show you. This is me, 2011. On the first General Assembly of Occupy Wall Street. This is a clip that is used in a lot of documentaries about Occupy Wall Street.
My name is Caleb, and I'm a student, a former student and a worker here in New York City. And I want to begin by giving a shout out to all the youth who couldn't come today because they're locked in the prisons, in a prison industrial complex where profits are made from jailing people away. Youth who are being picked up and jailed for things that are not criminal, things that shouldn't be jailed for. I also want to give a shout out to all the youth who, because of economic conditions, have been forced to join the U.S. military and are abroad used as cannon fodder for these profiteers and these bankers. They couldn't be here today. Now, if you look up at these buildings all around us, before these buildings were constructed, what did the people who built them have? They had a blueprint. They had a blueprint and a plan. And then they went to engineers, and they went to construction workers, and they constructed the building. Well, right now, Wall Street and the banker class, the people who actually run this country, they have a blueprint. And it's written in all of their Ayn Rand and Milton Friedman textbooks. Their blueprint is the destruction of the future of this generation. Their blueprint is the end of free public education. Their blueprint is the end of decent schools. Their blueprint is low wages. Their blueprint is massive unemployment. Their blueprint is massive home foreclosures. Their blueprint is massive destruction of the future and the end of the social programs that keep people alive. That's their blueprint, and they're mobilizing around it. They've got their Tea Party thugs mobilizing around it. They've got their police mobilizing around it to repress us and cage us in pins for speaking out. They've got their Democrats and their Republicans mobilizing around it. And if we're going to resist their program, we have to learn from the generations in the past who've done it before. In the 1930s, not far from here in Union Square, there was a demonstration of 10,000 people. And they gathered, and their slogan was "Fight or Starve." And they gathered in Union Square by the hundreds of thousands. And when the police told them they couldn't march, they said no. And they said, "This is our street, and we're going to march." And you know, they had a banner at that march. And you know what the slogan that was on the front banner of that march back in 1932? You know what the slogan was? Remember it. Remember it. Take it with you. If you remember a phrase, remember it. The slogan was "Class against class. And that's what we're talking about. Class against class. Say it with me. Class against class. Class against class. It's not about Democrat versus Republican. It's not about a liberal program or a conservative program. It's about the banker program versus the people's program. That's what's going on. If we're going to resist, we need a blueprint of our own. We need to design our own blueprint, and we need to start implementing it in the streets. Whether we need to coordinate all of the resistance together so we can build a strong, united program of resisting the bankers' agenda of shutting us down and destroying us. We need a program that says equal rights for immigrant workers. We need a program that says end police brutality. We need a program that says stop the cuts in food stamps. We need a program that says hands off our schools and universities. We need a program that includes health care for all, jobs for all, education for all. And we need to step back and think about the real possibility that there could be a time when people like us could actually own and operate the banks and the factories, and there would be no boss class or banker class running society. People like you and I could actually have a say and run society. That would require one thing very simply, and it would require us to abolish capitalism. The capitalist system is the ruthless evil system of the bankers, and I say if we're going to resist their program and their blueprint for destruction, we're going to have to abolish their system. So let's organize, let's be out there, and let's fight. Thank you.
So I've been doing this a long time. Not sure I would frame things the way I did in that speech any longer. I don't think I would refer to the Tea Party the way I've referred to them in the speech. I don't think I would emphasize things the way I did in that speech, but more or less, my message is the same, that the big banks and corporations, the Wall Street monopolies, they have a blueprint that they are trying to impose on this country. And that blueprint is the abolition of our living standards, the abolition of the middle class, the looting of the country economically, the destruction of wages and jobs and healthcare, the reduction of the population, the reduction of the life expectancy, as well as spreading their tentacles all around the world and beating down countries. And that this system that we live under, it's not ordinary capitalism, it's imperialism. It is globalism. It is capitalism in its monopolistic stage. The rule of the world by big financiers and ultra-rich monopolies. I don't exactly see things, I wouldn't frame things, but my overall view is the same. But the reason that I wanted to show you all this picture, and the reason I ended up writing the book is because of what was happening at the time of Occupy Wall Street. During Occupy Wall Street, you had hundreds of thousands of young people going out to protest against the big corporations, to protest against the influence of money in politics, etc. But they didn't say anything about something that was going on, being carried out by those very big banks and those very big corporations at the very same time. And that was that Libya, the most prosperous country on the African continent, was being bombed and destroyed. And I was constantly trying to get Occupy Wall Street to stand with Libya. Because Libya was an anti-imperialist country. And Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, he wanted Libya to have an independent African currency. He wanted to create a currency for Libya and all of Africa that would be backed by the gold standard. And he wanted to have an independent African economy. And what happened? Well, the U.S. government and social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all of that, fomented a protest movement against Gaddafi, largely based on the fact that Gaddafi allegedly had a Russian girlfriend who wasn't a Muslim. That was the main issue. They made it sound like it was about human rights or something. It was really, they got the most radical, extreme Muslims in Libya to protest against Gaddafi based on the fact that he had a girlfriend who was a non-Muslim, which is a sin in Islam. You can't have sex with anyone who's not your wife, and you can't marry anyone who's not a Muslim. You can't marry outside the faith. I don't know if it was true or not, but there were rumors that Gaddafi had a Russian girlfriend, wasn't his wife, but he was having sex with her, and she wasn't a Muslim. And so based on the idea that Gaddafi was a sinful non-Muslim, There were riots in Libya, and then weapons started flowing into Libya, and a violent movement to overthrow the Libyan government was created. And with social media, they made it sound like this was some kind of people's uprising, some kind of beautiful uprising of the people. But in reality, it was the richest people in Libya and the most radical extreme Muslims going against the majority of the population. And they also were angry about the fact that Gaddafi had a policy that any African could come to Libya and get guaranteed employment. If you were African and you went to Libya, you got a job. So many dark-skinned Africans from throughout the continent had gone to Libya to get a guaranteed job with the oil money. And so there was a lot of Africans in Libya. Libya is an African country, but the majority of Libyans are lighter-skinned North African Arabs, whereas, there is a minority in Libya of Black Africans. And what these anti-Gaddafi extremists would do is that they would go around lynching dark-skinned Africans and hanging their bodies and burning them, just like what they did in the Jim Crow South in the United States. And their feeling was, well, Gaddafi is not a good Muslim. Gaddafi is using Libya's oil money to hire a bunch of dark-skinned people that are inferior to us. And the richest people in Libya who were watching their phones and looking at Facebook and Twitter and social media went out and protested and started lynching dark-skinned Africans. And they were joined by the most radical, extreme terrorist Muslims. We're talking like Al-Qaeda type forces. And so the Libyan government moved in to crush them. And we now know that this war would have ended immediately, except NATO decided to back them up with cruise missiles. And so cruise missiles started flying into Libya. And the Libyan people were trying to defend their country from what George Soros and Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton were doing. And they were trying to defend their country. And Gaddafi was so confident that he had the people's support that he was just handing out guns on the street. He had trucks full of people with AK-47s and guns. They were just handing out guns on the street because they knew that people would point them in the right direction. The people of Libya supported Gaddafi. Why? Because Gaddafi provided them with the highest life expectancy on the African continent. Gaddafi had wiped out illiteracy in Libya. Gaddafi had created the world's largest irrigation system, the Great Man-Made River. Gaddafi had created universal employment in Libya. Gaddafi had provided free college education. In Libya, every person who got married got $20,000 automatically as their marriage bonus. And if you had a child, for every child that you had that was born, you got another payment. He made all the people of Libya shareholders. It's kind of like what Sarah Palin did with the oil money of Alaska. He made all the Libyan people shareholders in the state-run oil company. So you get married, $20,000, right? Which is a lot more money in Libya than it is over here. You have a child, boom, here's another payment, right? Gaddafi provided an amazing lifestyle for his people. And in addition to that, he had a policy that he would give a job to any African who came to Libya. And so there were thousands of African guest workers who came and were given decent wages and employment. They were not Libyan citizens, but they got jobs. And Gaddafi, he had supported the Irish freedom struggle and the IRA. He'd supported Nelson Mandela and his struggle against apartheid in South Africa. Gaddafi had supported the Black Panthers in America, and he'd supported the Nation of Islam and Black freedom groups. And Gaddafi was a popular leader, and he had built this very impoverished desert country of Libya up into a modern country with the world's largest irrigation system, wiped out illiteracy. And Gaddafi said that Libya was not going to be a puppet and a colony of the bankers. And when the oil prices shot up, as a result of George W. Bush invading Iraq. Libya got a lot more money because oil was more valuable. And with that money, they started planning to create their own African currency. They were going to create a bank for Africa, an African bank, an African development bank to build up Libya. And it was amazing. Did Gaddafi have a lot of problems? Sure. Was there political repression in Libya? Absolutely. Was it perfect? No. But Gaddafi, compared to the amount of poverty and misery that you have on the African continent, Gaddafi was on the right side. And Gaddafi, he said that he was not a communist. And that was interesting because Gaddafi aligned himself with many communist governments. But he himself was not a communist because he believed in God, because he was a Muslim. And he developed his own ideology. Communists in China, they had the Red Book. So Gaddafi, to make clear he wasn't a communist, he wrote the Green Book. And we published it. And his ideology, it's all laid out in this very well-written book called The Green Book that explains the ideology of Muammar Gaddafi. And it's called the Third Universal Theory between Marxism and capitalism. It's Islamic socialism, the third universal theory. And Libya had the highest life expectancy on the African continent. People from all over Africa were trying to get into Libya to get a job, to get access to this booming economy that was created. And then, during the Arab Spring, George Soros and the Color Revolution apparatus destabilized Libya and they destroyed it. And I got to tell you, as somebody who became interested in socialism as a young person, as somebody who lived through the financial crisis of 2008, and just as I was coming into the world, the U.S. economy crashed and I couldn't find a job. I lived in Cleveland. I sold my blood plasma. I mean, it was bad, right? Just as I was not in college anymore, the economy crashed and it was so hard to find decent employment. It was a nightmare. And I mean, conditions were very bad. Let me just put it that way. I would sell my blood plasma on the east side of Cleveland and on the west side of Cleveland, that is. And it was bad. These were bad times. And when I read about what Gaddafi did in Libya, putting oil under the hands of the people and using the oil profits to make Libya a more prosperous country, making the people of Libya the owners of their natural resources, I said, that's what I want. And when I called myself a socialist or a communist, that's what I meant. I wasn't interested in feminism. I mean, I wasn't opposed to women's rights. I wasn't opposed to women being treated as equals, but I wasn't interested in it because of some critique of gender construction. I wasn't in it for the LGBT thing. I wasn't in it because, I mean, as much as I might have had anger about various issues, as much as I did work against police brutality and racism, I saw socialism as an economic question. And I saw Libya as a socialist country, a country that had broken free from the rule of the bankers, a country that had taken control of its natural resources and built up its own economy, and as a result had really improved the living standards for the people. And I was supporting Gaddafi. And nothing broke my heart more than seeing how the socialist and communist movement betrayed Gaddafi. Gaddafi, who had supported the Black Panthers. Gaddafi, who had supported the Nation of Islam. Gaddafi, who had supported the IRA, who had supported Nelson Mandela. Gaddafi, who had supported the Palestinians. Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, was betrayed by the communist movement. Because when the USA was bombing Libya, and when this prosperous African country was being reduced to rubble, Our president was named Barack Hussein Obama, the first black president. And they framed the uprising against Gaddafi as a people's uprising against a dictator. And almost every last stinking communist group, the ISO, the International Socialist Organization, the Communist Party USA, the Socialist Workers' Party, all of them supported the revolution against Gaddafi. And the most prosperous country in Africa was bombed to rubble. And mobs of people that were being manipulated by Facebook and Twitter were going around and hanging black people from trees and lighting their bodies on fire. They wrote about it in the New York Times. It's confirmed. This isn't propaganda. This is fact. And all the socialists and the communists supported it because it was part of the revolution. Because Gaddafi, they interpreted like a paragraph in this book as being sexist. And it was horrifying to me. It was absolutely horrifying to me to see what happened. And the communist group that I was in, Ramsey Clark, he supported Gaddafi. He went to Libya to support Gaddafi. And former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney, who is my friend, she supported Gaddafi in Libya. And Alex Jones supported Gaddafi and actually did some of the best reporting I've ever heard Alex Jones do. He went to Libya and he reported the truth about what was happening. But the overwhelming majority of the socialist and the communist groups didn't support Gaddafi. These people are supposed to be anti-war. They're supposed to be anti-imperialist. They're supposed to be socialists. But an African socialist leader gets his country destroyed by the Pentagon. And they support it because Facebook and Twitter said to. It's revolution. It's Barack Obama, the first black president. I was utterly horrified, and I was in the Occupy Wall Street Park on October 20th, 2011, which is the day that Gaddafi died. And what I noticed that day was that there was a class divide in the park. There was a class divide in the park because there were a lot of people at Occupy Wall Street with scraggly beards, with clothes that were ripped up and weren't in the best condition. There were a lot of people at Occupy Wall Street who were like me. They were from Oklahoma, they were from Ohio, they were from Pennsylvania, they were from Kentucky, they were from Georgia, they were from Atlanta, they were from Alabama. They were young people who were mad about the situation in the country. They tended to be into what you might call conspiracy theories, listen to Alex Jones. A lot of them called themselves libertarians. And they were working class people who grew up in small towns, who grew up in red states and rural areas, and they supported Gaddafi. They saw him as a man who was developing an independent African currency. They saw Gaddafi as a man who was opposing the global financial system that is destroying our communities. And they supported Gaddafi. But there was another class of people at Occupy Wall Street who were dressed very nicely. A lot of them even stayed in luxury hotels rather than in the park. And they got all the interviews and appeared on MSNBC and were the face of Occupy Wall Street. And they were all getting paid by foundations to be there. Most of them were just plain old liberal activists. But some of them were Trotskyites. And some of them were anarchists. Even a few of them were Maoists. But they were wealthy. They had their hipster glasses and their tight jeans. They had their expensive clothes. They had their degrees from Ivy League schools. And they walked around and they were all happy that Gaddafi was killed. They were so happy that Gaddafi was killed. Why? Because Gaddafi was a dictator. Gaddafi wasn't woke. Gaddafi was not correct on LGBT. He didn't start his meetings with the pronouns. And it was a class divide. The rich kids, the trust fund kids at Occupy Wall Street, the Ivy League liberal woke brats who had their degree in gender studies, they all supported the destruction of Libya. And it was working class people like me, most of whom were very anti-communist, most of whom were libertarians or conservatives or, conspiracy minded and thought communism was bad. They're the ones They are the ones who opposed what happened. And that moment was a big wake-up call for me. And even the communist group I was in, we nominally supported Gaddafi. Members of our group went to Libya with Ramsey Clark, but there was always this reluctance. Oh, let's not support him too loud. And let's always make clear he's not really a socialist because he's a Muslim. And I got red in the face and fired up. And I talk about it in my introduction to the Green Book about why were they not standing with Libya when it was under attack? Something was wrong. We were supposed to be anti-war. We were supposed to be anti-imperialist. We were supposed to be socialists. Even the people I was with couldn't really stand with Gaddafi. But all these libertarians could. So what was going on? What was happening? And that was the beginning of the journey that led me to write this book about Kamala Harris. So during the Occupy Wall Street protests, I became the spokesperson for the International Action Center. I spoke at on international television representing them. I didn't get paid. I mean, I might have gotten paid later, but at first I didn't get paid. And I would appear on Press TV from Iran. I would appear on RT from Russia as an analyst. I would appear on Turkish television. I went on Saudi television. I went on all kinds of places as an Occupy Wall Street talking head representing the International Action Center, Ramsey Clark. And it was pretty wild. And a lot of different things happened. And I could tell you a lot of stories. I was part of planning the protests against the Democrat National Convention in 2012 in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was with the International Action Center, and they sent me to North Carolina for a month. And I lived in this hotel with a lot of other organizers, and we got the permits and we arranged the protests against the Democrat National Convention in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Wall Street of the South, the home of Bank of America. And what I remember was that the local police department in Charlotte, North Carolina, they were very strict about permits, and they said you cannot set up a tent in the park and all of that until the convention started. And once the Democrats got to town, they called us and they wanted us to set up tents in the park. And in fact, they gave us the park right next to the convention center. And they said, please set up Occupy Wall Street tents in this park right now. And I'm just like, what's going on? What are you talking about? And they set up Occupy Wall Street tents and they filmed us. And that night when Elizabeth Warren got up and said, corporations are not people. They're not people. They cut away on CNN or MSNBC to the Occupy Wall Street tents. Like Barack Obama is the leader of the movement. It was fake. We were part of the window dressing. And I saw that up close. And I remember we didn't even call our rally a march against the Democrat National Convention. We didn't even call it a march against Obama. We called it a march against Wall Street South. And everything we did, even though we were supposed to be protesting the Democrats, everything we did was more or less helping the Democrats have this image of being the People's Party, which they were not. helping the Democrats channel the Occupy Wall Street energy, which they were not channeling. Conditions for working Americans were getting worse. They were bailing out Wall Street. We were part of the window dressing. It was fake. And then the worst part is I was there. I was a full-time organizer, and I was there in Charlotte with these other people, and I'm a full-time staffer with this communist group. And I couldn't relate to these people. I became a communist because I wanted a planned economy, because I wanted the banks, factories, and industries to be organized to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. And these people didn't want that. They wanted to talk about trans rights. They wanted to talk about white sexist males. And I just couldn't stand these people. The drama and the gossiping and the kindergarten atmosphere. The kindergarten teacher. If you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice. And for a month, I was just absolutely miserable with these people. Absolutely miserable with them. And everyone just wanted to talk about who was the most oppressed and who was the most transgender and who was the most this and that. And it was sickening. It was absolutely sickening. But then, a couple of years later, I got an invitation to the Islamic Republic of Iran. And I went to Iran. And that was a life-changing experience. And I went to a global communist festival in Quito, Ecuador, and I met communists from Vietnam and communists from Cuba and communists from Venezuela, communists from India, communists from Thailand, communists from all over the world. And I realized these people are different. They all wore suits and ties. They were all patriotic to their country. They had no problem with religion. In fact, many of the South and Central American and Russian communists were Christians, very openly Christians. They would talk about Jesus being the first socialist in history. And they were not pro-LGBT. Many of them said they thought homosexuality was a disease from capitalism. They thought homosexuality was bourgeois decadence. They thought the LGBT movement was part of the George Soros Pentagon conspiracies against their country. They weren't obsessed with the LGBT thing. And they wore suits and ties, and they were focused on what I was focused on, economics. I went to Venezuela in 2015. But long story short, I went to Iran in 2015, and I went on a ship. I went on a ship to try and deliver medical aid to the country of Yemen. And that was a life-changing experience. I can go into great detail about it at another time, but for 13 days, I was on a ship that was headed toward one of the poorest countries in the world that was war-torn at the time. I was trying to deliver medical aid, and we couldn't deliver the medical aid because the port we were supposed to deliver it to was bombed 8 times in a single day. 8 times in a single day, the port was bombed. All kinds of dock workers and medical students were killed because they had wanted to cooperate with this humanitarian mission from the Red Crescent Society of Iran. And we were forced to turn our boat around and go to Djibouti. And I spent 13 days on this ship with very few English speakers. And it was on that boat that I reconnected with my Christian faith. And I realized that I would never have become a communist or a socialist if it wasn't for the teachings of Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for the fact that as a small child, I had decided that I should strive to be Christ-like. And I had a religious awakening on that ship. And I rediscovered and I reconnected with God. And it was an amazing experience. And when I came back to the United States, my patience with leftists and socialists and communists had come to an end. I couldn't do it anymore. And I wanted a better country. I wanted jobs and schools and healthcare, and I wanted an end to the wars. I wanted solidarity with the people of the world resisting imperialism, people like Gaddafi, people like the people in Libya who had fought against American imperialism. And I didn't want to do the woke thing. I didn't want to do, if you hear me clap once, if you hear me clap twice. I didn't want to do that. And my patience for that ran out. And all of a sudden, I left the communist group I was in, tried to leave on friendly terms, but all the cancel culture got going. I was a Nazi. How was I a Nazi? Right? I'm definitely not a Nazi. In an interracial marriage, I've spent years opposing police brutality, but no, all over the internet, I was a Nazi. I was a white supremacist. I was an awful person. I'm just like, how is this happening? What's going on? And I was trying to process everything. I continued working as a reporter at RT News, doing my job. And at RT, I met someone who came into RT, was around RT, I'm not going to go into great detail, who had worked with Kamala Harris's father. And this person said to me, you really ought to look into this. And at the time that Kamala Harris was running for president in 2020, this person told me that Kamala Harris's father was a communist. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that. I would say he's a Marxian economist. He's an academic economist with a Marxian bent. This person told me that Kamala Harris's father, who he knew personally, had worked with in the past, was a communist. And they gave me this little hint. Didn't tell me what to do with it. Didn't give me any inside information, but they mentioned that Kamala Harris's father was a communist. And then the pandemic happened, and I had a lot of time. And so I started digging. I started digging. And I was going on a personal journey, trying to figure out what was wrong with leftism. Why was this movement that I had given everything I believed in? Everything in my life was all about socialism. I had studied Marxism. I wanted socialism more than anything. I was against this system of big bankers ruling the world and destroying countries with war. And I had risked my life trying to help the people of Yemen as their country was being bombed. And what was going on? What was going on? Why was it that my movement, the movement that I had spent my entire adult life studying and giving myself to, why had it lost its way and turned into woke insanity? And why would the child of a communist become Kamala Harris? And I read about what Kamala Harris did as the prosecutor in California who destroyed the lives of thousands of people. Reason Magazine did amazing exposés about Kamala Harris and who she was when she was the prosecutor of that state, of the Bay Area, and then later of the entire state of California. Drug labs turning over false positive results and her covering that up because she wanted people to be locked up. Kevin Cooper, hours away from execution, her office arguing that they wanted to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. Right? An innocent man is on death row, and they want to acquire DNA evidence to make sure he's actually guilty of the crime. And Kamala Harris's office tries to stop it from happening, tries to stop the DNA evidence from being acquired, laughing about how she prosecuted parents because their children were truant from school, making fun of leftists, mocking them. Build more schools, less jails. Build more schools, less jails. And she's laughing at how much she hates people that say build more schools and less jails. How much contempt she has for people that oppose mass incarceration, that oppose the very issues that she now tries to make her career around. And I investigated. And I investigated why did Hillary Clinton's backers all switch their money to go behind Kamala Harris? Well, there was a meeting that happened. And why did Tulsi Gabbard use her limited time on the debate stage to go after Kamala Harris? Of all the other candidates she opposed, why Kamala? And amid all this research that I did, I spent hours and hours, and I put my heart and soul into this book. It's 133 pages long. And let me say this is not a partisan hit piece on Kamala Harris, because I wouldn't learn anything from a partisan hit piece on Kamala Harris. There are books out there that are just kind of like, this politician's bad. You know, I liked Michael Moore's movies years ago. I don't much care for what he does now, but years ago I liked them, but I didn't like Fahrenheit 9/11 because it had no thesis. I didn't learn anything from it. I just learned Bush is bad. Right? It was just a partisan. He just threw everything he could at George W. Bush. He threw, you know, they say if you throw enough crap at the wall, some of it sticks. You throw everything but the kitchen sink at somebody. That's not what this book is. You'll notice the title of this book is Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. That's the name of this book, Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an essay in 3 parts. And I'll just tell you, this book, it is 3 chapters long. It's 3 short essays that I wrote using Kamala Harris and what I learned from all the research I was doing about her life and where she came from to make 3 political points. Point number 1, chapter number 1 is called Where Did Kamala Harris Come From? And I talk about the fact that both Kamala Harris's parents were communists, were leftist activists, that Kamala Harris's father is a Marxist economist. Kamala Harris's mother was a cancer researcher at University of California, Berkeley, who met Kamala Harris's father at protests. And this was the free speech movement. This was the era of 1960s counterculture leftism. And what I talk about in that first essay is that while there was an upsurge of interest in socialism and communism and leftism, there was also a huge amount of government infiltration going on. And that starting really after the downfall of McCarthyism, the US government started funding socialist and communist organizations and socialist and communist writers and manipulating and reinventing and reworking their politics. And that what we call the new left in the United States is not the natural outgrowth of socialism and communism. The new left is very much a government creation. It is something that came about as a result of U.S. intelligence operations, particularly Project MKUltra, in which drugs were widely distributed throughout the country, and the Congress for Cultural Freedom program, in which all kinds of CIA manipulation and money was poured into promoting certain leftist and socialist voices in the United States and around the world, Partisan Review magazine, etc. And that starting in the 1950s, up into the 60s, 70s, that there has been a lot of intentional manipulation of socialist and communist politics, funding of left-wing activism by the Rockefellers, by the Ford Foundation, etc. And that in the process of doing that, they reinvented what left-wing politics is all about. And Kamala Harris grew up in the middle of all of this. Kamala Harris, in her autobiography, she talks about how she went to Rainbow Sign, a cultural center in Oakland, California. And she was involved in community theater there with her sister. And this cultural center was set up, it appears, by individuals linked to the CIA. And it was a black cultural center that was set up and funded by what looks like, I mean, it was set up and arranged by the American government to counter the Black Panthers and counter revolutionary Black nationalists. And Rainbow Sign, it was linked to certain Black nationalist intellectuals, and it was this Black freedom, Black power center that was set up to counter the Black Panthers, who were considered subversives and a threat and revolutionaries. And it was funded, and it was well set up, and funded by, and it had links to intellectuals who were very clearly tied to the American, intelligence agency, James Baldwin and Ralph Ellison and people like that. And it was this Black cultural center where Kamala Harris got her political upbringing. And it was very much set up by forces that had funded it and set it up as a way to counter the genuine Black revolutionary movement. And Kamala Harris brags about it. And in fact, one of the things that she did is that she sang in a performance. This is very interesting. There was a TV special in 1970 called Free to Be You and Me. Free to Be You and Me. And it was a TV special with cartoons aimed at promoting feminism to children. And who wrote it? Gloria Steinem. Gloria Steinem, the founder of Ms. Magazine, the face of 1970s feminism. She wrote this children's TV special all about feminism, about women can do the jobs that men do, etc. Right? Traditional gender roles are no good. They oppress people, etc. Well, Gloria Steinem brags in her autobiography about how the CIA has promoted her like crazy, about how the CIA is great. In fact, before she was even a feminist, she was a CIA agent who pretended to be a communist and went to communist youth festivals and set off smoke bombs and stuff like that. And she brags about this. I mean, and she wrote this TV special, Free to Be You and Me. And they showed it on American television to promote feminism. And little Kamala Harris in Oakland, California, she did the stage version of it. And Kamala and her sister were up there singing at this Black cultural center paid for by the CIA, singing all about, about free to be you and me and gender traditional roles are no good and all of this. Right? Berkeley, where Kamala Harris, Berkeley, Oakland, the Bay Area in the 1960s and 70s, when Kamala Harris was a child, was ground zero for Project MK Ultra. They had Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA was just handing people acid on the street randomly. They had all kinds of covert funding going to various communist groups to violently attack each other and manipulate each other. This is where Jim Jones and the People's Temple was operating, right? This is where George Moscone, the mayor, was murdered mysteriously and replaced by Dianne Feinstein. San Francisco politics, where Kamala Harris was growing up and where she eventually ascended in politics herself, was a cesspool of CIA manipulation of socialist and communist groups, CIA promotion of drug use, CIA promotion of left adventurous terrorist organizations like the Symbionese Liberation Army. And Kamala Harris grew up in this complete insane clusterfuck of bizarre political manipulation. And that's where Kamala Harris grew up. So that's my first essay in there. And I go into great detail and I talk about why it is that the American government started funding and promoting socialist and communist politics while reinventing it during the 70s. And how that atmosphere, Kamala Harris brags, I mean, she's open about that is where she came from. She was at Rainbow Sign Cultural Center. She was singing Free to Be You and Me. She was all over the Bay Area with her sister, and she grew up in the CIA-controlled wing of Black Power, which is very weird. And that's the first essay. The second essay is called Psychology Behind Politics. Psychology Behind Politics. And that's where I talk about a man that nobody's talking about, who the whole world should be talking about, Donald Harris. Because Donald Harris, Kamala Harris's father, can you all hear me? Donald Harris, Kamala Harris' father, denounced her presidential campaign. Kamala Harris was giving an interview on The Breakfast Club radio show, and they asked her, have you ever smoked marijuana? And she laughed about it. And she said, oh, yes, she smoked marijuana in college. And they said, what were you listening to while you smoked marijuana? She said, had to be Snoop, had to be Snoop. Well, it's so funny because the years she was in college, Snoop Dogg had not yet released an album. So she was smoking some really good weed because she could hear into the future as she was listening, as she was smoking it. Regardless, though, she then said, after saying it had to be Snoop, even though when she was in college, Snoop Dogg had not yet released an album. From there, she said, half my family is from Jamaica. What do you think? Ha, 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 ha. She's laughing it off with her forced laugh. Well, that got back to Donald Harris. Donald Harris did not appreciate her saying, half my family is from Jamaica, because it's his half. And that's when we suddenly got a glimpse of the ugly truth of who Kamala Harris is psychologically and how it is that Kamala Harris was able to grow up in Black power and become the queen of mass incarceration. We now find out that Kamala Harris most likely lied in her autobiography. In her book, The Truths We Hold, she claims, she talks about her parents' divorce, and she says, the only thing they fought over was the books. Oh, isn't that sweet? Well, Donald Harris, her father, has a little bit of a different recollection of that. He remembers that they fought over something else her parents fought over when they split up, not just the books. They fought over Kamala and her sister. There was a custody battle. And in that custody battle, Donald Harris talked about how the stereotype, I believe he says, of a deadbeat dad and a Negro from the islands was used to take away his ability to see his daughter. And even though this man is a PhD, this is an economics professor at a major university, the courts still had the stereotype of a Black man, of a Caribbean man, and they took away his custody of his daughter. And that, when Kamala, played up to the idea that Jamaicans were pot smokers, were lazy pot smokers or whatever, he lost it, because that stereotype is what they used to take his daughters away from him with. And he went to the mainstream media and he said that he spoke for his entire Jamaican family when he denounced this travesty of identity politics. It was bold. And then he wrote an essay, which I quote in there, called Reflections of a Jamaican Father. And that essay is written very carefully. It's almost written in code. I would encourage you to just go read it for yourself. There's all these little hints about what may have been the issue. He doesn't exactly say it, but he talks about how sad he is that Kamala never met her grandparents, her grandmother in particular. Her grandmother was a strong woman and a socialist. And there's a lot of little hints in that essay about what is going on. But if you listen to Kamala Harris, she never talks about her father. She talks about her mother endlessly. Her mother, oh my goodness, her mother is a saint. Her mother is an icon. Her mother is one of the greatest people who ever existed. But her father, an economics professor, whatever, she doesn't want you to know anything about her father. Her father didn't attend her inauguration as vice president. Her father doesn't speak to her. But while Kamala never talks about her father, she talks about her childhood obsessively. No politician that I have ever heard of has talked about their own childhood as much as Kamala Harris does. She has made T-shirts with her 10-year-old self on them. When she justified the jailing of parents for truancy, she said, I would never have been anywhere if it wasn't for my education. She shouts at Joe Biden when Joe Biden says, when she's calling out Joe Biden for supporting school busing years ago or opposing school busing, she shouts, I was in the first class to ever have been integrated. That little girl was me. Kamala Harris has this pity story in her head about poor little Kamala Harris. Poor little Kamala, who the world was unfair to. She said, when I was little, my neighbors wouldn't play with me because they thought I was black. I mean, I'm sure all of these things are awful. I'm not trying to denigrate what she went through. She probably, let me be very clear about this. Kamala Harris has suffered horrendously in her life. Okay. And I'm not belittling what she's been through, right? What we know, what she's talked about, the racial discrimination, being estranged from her father, I mean, she's suffered, and I'm not making light of her suffering. And I've even heard rumors about, she never talks about the years in high school when she was in Quebec. She never talks about that. And I've heard rumors about what happened to her when she was a teenager in Quebec. And I don't want to ever belittle any of that. Okay. She's allowed to be a victim. She's allowed to have suffered what she went through. She had an awful childhood. She had an awful teen years. She's had a hard life. And that's not the point. The point isn't that she hasn't suffered. The point is that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The world has been unfair to her. And now she wants revenge on the world. And her entire adult life is a struggle for revenge. She wants to make people pay for what happened to little Kamala. And that's why the image, the T-shirt of little Kamala Harris, right? That little girl was me T-shirt. That's why the endless references to, racism when she was a child, the endless references to her own childhood. That's what it's about, because that image is flashing in her head constantly. She's thinking about what happened to little Kamala Harris and how the world doesn't understand her, how no one's ever been fair to her, how she's been mistreated. She's a victim, and she's going to make people pay. And she doesn't care. She does not care about the results. Think about those parents that she prosecuted for truancy. Is it a problem if kids aren't going to school? Sure. Is it a problem if kids are being neglected and not taken to school? Absolutely. But does it help to then take their parents and throw them in prison and have their kids go into the foster system? No. So why would you do that? Well, because it's not about helping those kids. It's about those parents making them pay. That's what it's about. And Kamala Harris, look, if you know anything about the criminal justice system in this country, let me just tell you this, right? Nobody goes to trial in the United States. Plea bargains, right? If you get arrested for something, you make a plea deal. Very, very rarely does anybody go on trial in the United States because it takes years. It's very expensive. It just doesn't happen. So if somebody goes on trial, they actually go on trial, something's off. Now in California, they have the 3 strikes law, where if you're convicted of a felony for a third time, automatic 25 years. So if it's your third strike, you're going on trial no matter what. If you're very wealthy, you can afford to go on trial. You can afford to spend the thousands and thousands of dollars and spend 2 years going to court dates and all of that. But the overwhelming majority of people in the United States do not go to trial because it's expensive and you lose. Even though if someone is going on trial, and you should remember this if you're ever in a jury, right? The chances that someone's innocent if they are on trial are massive. It's not necessarily true. Guilty people go on trial too because it's their third strike or because they have money. But if someone in the United States is a defendant in court and it actually goes to trial, there's a very, very, very good chance that they are innocent, because why in the world would they risk going on trial if they were not innocent? Right? But regardless, Kamala Harris was a trial lawyer, and her job was to convince juries to throw black men in jail. And she rose up the ranks of the California criminal justice system in the 90s while the mass incarceration was rising in California, while people were being imprisoned all throughout California. She was a dark-skinned woman, a woman of color, a woman who looked like an African-American, even though she's Jamaican and Indian. And she knew how to convince jurors who might be somewhat suspicious. The white lady was up there doing it. They might not believe them. But she was able to convince juries to convict black men. And she oversaw the conviction of black men like crazy. Black men who look an awful lot like Donald Harris, her father, who was a black man. And Kamala Harris rose up the ranks of the California mass incarceration machine, the prison industrial complex, jailing black men, imprisoning black men. And again, is it about helping people? No. As a result of Kamala Harris's actions, thousands of children grew up without a father, just like she did. And the more you look into what Kamala Harris was doing, she didn't have to do this. Prosecutors, sure. Right? Prosecutors, their job is to represent one side, etc. But she didn't have to conceal that drug labs were turning over false positives. She didn't have to do that, but she did. She could have actually prosecuted the Oakland Police Department when they were caught engaging in human trafficking. That would have been the ethical thing to do. The local police department is smuggling children and human trafficking. You prosecute them. She didn't do that for some reason, right? She didn't prosecute the cops when they broke the law. And you look at the details. I mean, when she was California Attorney General, she would literally argue that people needed to stay in jail just because they needed their cheap labor. I mean, what kind of ethical person would make that argument? That's their argument for keeping someone in jail. We don't want to hire a law-abiding citizen. We don't want to hire somebody that we have to pay benefits and such to. No, we need to keep this person locked up because we want to exploit their labor. We want to take a job away. We want to take a job away from a law-abiding citizen, and we want to keep someone incarcerated. It's nuts. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. And the craziest thing is that now she wants you to think she's Miss Black Lives Matter. She is not Miss Black Lives Matter. Kamala Harris is a woman who was Miss Mass Incarceration. She was the queen of mass incarceration. And she did reprehensible, immoral things that were called out by the courts in California, that were widely condemned at the time. She did reprehensible and immoral things, and I quote Reason Magazine about all of them in this book. She did things that would make your skin crawl when she was California State Attorney General, because she has absolutely no ethical or moral concern for other people. Why? Because she sees herself as a victim. Because she's got some very serious rage and a victim complex. She hates her father. She's been through a lot of trauma in her life, and she is a narcissist. You know, the Greek story of Narcissus, a man who was so transfixed by his own image that he lost touch with the rest of the world. That's Kamala. She is a narcissist. She is so traumatized and so obsessed with seeing herself as a victim, of thinking that little girl was me. It was so unfair what happened to me. I'm a victim of racism. I'm a victim of bullying. Oh, my dad was abusive, or my dad wasn't there for me. She is caught up in a victim complex so much that she can destroy the lives of thousands of people for smoking marijuana. And then they ask her, hey, did you ever smoke marijuana? She's like, half my family's from Jamaica. Had to be Snoop. She doesn't care. It doesn't matter to her. Because those people don't matter. Those people who she threw in jail for smoking marijuana, they're not people. Let's focus on her, about how the world's been unfair to her, about how that little girl was her, about how she was on a school bus and she got bullied and she was a victim of race. It's deranged. And that this mindset, this victim complex, this desire for vengeance against powerful men, this personality is all over the Hillary Clinton State Department. Samantha Power, it's the exact same story. Amy Klobuchar, same story. And that personalities are important, because I start the chapter out talking about how Donald Trump and Donald Trump and George W. Bush have a very similar personality based on a very similar life experience. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton have a very similar life story, a very similar personality. And that they study these people's personalities. When they go to the Ivy League schools, and they're going through the Ivy League schools and they're being vetted for a place in the American political elite, they study these people's personalities. And the type of personality that the Hillary Clinton wing of American politics has vetted for is a woman who hates her father and is estranged from her father and idealizes her mother and wants vengeance. And my book talks all about this. That's the second chapter of my book. I go into great detail about how this desire for vengeance, this desire for destruction, this indifference to the actual results. The focus is on hurting the bad guys. It's not about making the world a better place. It's about harming other people. That's Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris wants to harm other people. She wants other people to pay. She wants to show everyone that she's not weak and she's not a child, and that everyone was, that little girl was her, and it's deranged. And I talk about this in the second chapter of the book. And in the third chapter of the book, I talk about the geopolitics. And I talk about why it is that all of Hillary Clinton's backers flipped their money to supporting Kamala Harris in 2020. And I talk about Anne Marie Slaughter. And I talk about the presidency of Barack Obama and what happened when Hillary Clinton was running the U.S. State Department, and how Hillary Clinton used the U.S. State Department to foment chaos and instability and unrest all over the world. And how Anne Marie Slaughter of New America Foundation decided that's the job of the American government, to spread the open international system, to spread revolution and chaos all over the world, to spread that open international system all over the world. That's the job of the American government. And the enemy is populism, populists like Trump or Xi Jinping or Putin or Gaddafi or Maduro. And that is their job, is to spread revolution, use freedom of information, i.e. social media, to spread revolution all over the world. And how Hillary Clinton even went against the wishes of Barack Obama to do this, and how Jared Andrew Cohen functioned as the back channel between the State Department and Silicon Valley. And they were using social media to foment chaos and instability and unrest all over the world. And the military wasn't happy about it. And terrorist groups got stronger as a result of it. And that there's a faction in the military that's saying, no more, no more. We are not having another Arab Spring. We're still picking up the pieces. We got ISIS. We got the refugee crisis. And Michael Flynn and Tulsi Gabbard represent a faction in the Pentagon they're not communists or socialists or anti-imperialists. They just don't want another Arab Spring. They want to get along with Russia because Russia is really good at monitoring Islamic terrorist organizations and dealing with them. And that there is a clear division within the Pentagon, within the ruling class, about how to deal with things. And that permanent color revolution, spread revolution all over the world faction, that's who's behind Kamala Harris. And there's a lot of people in the military. There's a lot of other people in the elite in U.S. society that say, no way in hell are we letting that happen again. That Kamala Harris is the selected candidate of the color revolution faction. And that's the third essay. And I talk about geopolitics. And that's this book. It is 133 pages long, not very long. And it's not a partisan hit piece. It is an analysis of 3 different aspects of Kamala Harris and what we can learn from them about politics and about the American system and the future of the country. And this book, I would argue, is a very patriotic book. I end by talking about Roosevelt and Huey Long and Abraham Lincoln, and how we need a genuine populist leader in this country, someone who appeals to the people of the United States and gives them, is their champion in a fatherly way. I actually, this is a very, very patriotic book about how what we need is strong leadership that brings out the best in us. And I criticize Donald Trump very harshly in this book. I take Donald Trump to task for some of his anti-immigrant rhetoric, how he's appealing to negative feelings. I say some pretty extreme things against Donald Trump in this book. I probably wouldn't even say those things now. I've changed my perspective on Trump a bit since I wrote this. So this book is not a partisan hit piece. This book is certainly not a Russian propaganda operation. No Russian had anything to do with me writing this. If I had told the Russian people I work with that I was doing this, they probably would have told me not to do it. This book is a masterpiece, and I'm proud of it. And the fact that Amazon.com decided to arbitrarily ban it after 4 years of being in print, and thus create a huge amount of outrage, bring it on. Bring it on. Bring it on. I stand by this book. I'm proud of this book. This book is not a partisan hit piece. This book is a beautiful piece of political analysis. It's one of the best things I ever wrote. And I'm proud of it. And I'm glad that Kamala Harris is so upset by this book that strings were pulled to remove it from Amazon. I know her staff has a copy of it. I know that. I know I've been told that. I know she knows about it. I can't exactly say why on here. I don't want to reveal too much, but I know that her staff has a copy of it. And I don't care. And you know what? I'm glad that Jimmy Dore tweeted about it. I'm glad that Max Blumenthal tweeted about it. I am glad that this book is getting some attention. And right now, because Amazon has banned it, they won't redo it even with a new cover. Every time I resubmit it, it just, gets unsubmitted immediately. because of that, you can order it on Lulu. The link is down below. And I am also keeping in effect the deal that I made, right? If you, on Cash App, if you send me $10 on Cash App to Caleb Maupin 22, include your email, I will send you the PDF. All right. Look, I'm not going to get rich off this book. It's been in print for 4 years. I've sold a couple hundred of them. I've sold a lot more in the last few days than I did before. I'll just tell you that much. But if you want me to just email you the PDF, all you need to do is Cash App me $10 and include your email so I know where to send it to. Right. And I didn't write the book to get rich. Right. It's floating around and, but if you want a PDF of it, I'll just do that. So you don't have to wait for the Lulu edition to show up at your door. It's available if you want a print copy of it on Lulu with a neutral cover. It doesn't have this cover on it because I look, if somebody claims that somehow they own this image, I don't want to fight them. Right. I know Arthur Porter designed this. I give him credit on the back. See, it says designed by Arthur Porter. He designed it. He made it. That's our logo for the Center for Political Innovation. But look, if somebody thinks that this is not whatever, I don't want to push back on that. But that's not what happened, because if that was the case, Amazon would let me re-upload it with a different cover, but they won't. Right. This was a political decision. Bring it on, Kamala. Bring it on. Bring it on, because I'll tell you this, folks, I have been subjected to a huge amount of character assassination. I have had all of my dirty laundry thrown out on the internet. I have been through so much. Bring it on. Bring it on, right? Bring it on. Bring it on, right? This book is not a Russian conspiracy. No Russian had anything to do with publishing it. But bring it on, Kamala. Bring it on. I know what you are. I know what you are, Kamala Harris. You're a home wrecker. You're a vicious prosecutor, a lying, dishonest prosecutor who destroyed all kinds of people's innocent lives. You're a puppet of the warmongering lobby. You're a narcissist. You take pleasure in harming other people. You have serious psychological problems. You need mental health assistance. You need lots of therapy. You do not need to be in the Oval Office. Bring it on. Bring it on. Everyone needs to know who you are, right? I don't think that you're a bad person. I don't want any harm to come to you. I just don't want you to sit in the Oval Office, because I don't want your finger on the nuclear button. Somebody who is willing to execute Kevin Cooper and tried to block DNA evidence doesn't belong in the Oval Office with their finger on the nuclear button. Kamala, I hope that you have a great life. I hope you retire and you get a nice place on the beach in California and you smoke lots of weed and you listen to Snoop Dogg. I don't wish you any harm. I really don't, right? I think that your childhood was awful. Awful things happened to you during your childhood, and you didn't deserve any of that. And I'm proud of you that you have been able to become so successful despite having such trauma and pain in your past. But you should not be president, and you should never be in public office again. And you shouldn't be able to enact your revenge fantasy with the lives of American working families, because I know what you'll do as president, Kamala. You will send young men and young women from Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas and Alabama and Missouri to go die in wars. And I ain't okay with that. You will spend millions of dollars to continue a war in Ukraine and provoke a confrontation with Russia while our country's falling apart. I ain't not okay with that. You will increase the police state. Already, Joe Biden's administration is going after the Uhuru movement and prosecuting the Uhuru movement. You will take away our civil liberties. You're already trying to make it impossible for people to read books that criticize you on Amazon.com. Imagine what you'll do in terms of suppressing our freedom of speech and our freedom of information. You want to coordinate with Silicon Valley to manipulate people and foment global revolution. And that means suppressing freedom of speech and people's opinions. I am not okay with what you will do as president. I don't care how you live your life. I don't care what you do. I don't want you to be punished for all the evil things that you've done. I don't want that. I want you to live a happy life. I want you to retire and be happy, but I do not want you in the Oval Office. You have no business being president. And the people who picked you out, they didn't pick you out because they respect you, because they look up to you. They picked you out because they see you as a weak and damaged person, and they know exactly how to push your buttons to get you to do more and more evil things. And they saw how evil you were when you were California Attorney General, how you have no remorse about what you've done, and they are thinking, what can we get her to do? Man, we'll just push those buttons when she's in there, and we can get her to do whatever they want. They see you as their monkey, Kamala. They see you as their little monkey that they can push, that they can manipulate. They know exactly how to manipulate you. They know exactly the right trigger words to say to you. They see you as a weak, damaged person they can manipulate. And that is way too much risk for our country. It's way too much risk for our country, Kamala. Way, way too much risk for our country to have your finger on the nuclear button, to have you in total control of the Department of Justice. Way, way too much. Way, way too much risk. I am not a vengeful person. I'm not happy about my book being banned from Amazon, a book that I put my heart and soul into, a book that is not by any means a partisan hit piece. I ain't happy about it. I don't like being censored, Kamala. I don't like my analysis of the woman who could be the president of my country, somebody that I have the right to speak about, being suppressed. I don't like my right as an American to engage in journalism and freedom of the press and talk about who you are. I don't like seeing that messed with. I don't like seeing Silicon Valley try and tell me what I am allowed to say about who our next president could be. I don't appreciate it, Kamala, but I wish you no ill will. I just don't want you to be president. I don't want you to be president. I think anyone who knows the truth about you, would also not want you to be president, Kamala. Anyone who knows the truth about you and how unstable you are and the evil things that you have done would not want you to be president. So I am going to show a clip that I made. You all, if you watch this channel regularly, you've seen it many times, but the world needs to see this clip. I'm going to show this clip, and from there, we'll start answering questions. So here we go.
It's bizarre as she's trying to frame herself as Miss Black Lives Matter, when in reality, Kamala Harris was the queen of mass incarceration.
Kevin Cooper was hours away from receiving lethal injection. Hours away from it. His lawyers asked that DNA evidence be acquired in order to make sure he was actually guilty of the crime. And Kamala Harris's office tried to prevent DNA evidence from being acquired. They wanted Kevin Cooper to be executed, but the governor of California disagreed. They acquired DNA evidence, and the execution was stopped. The New York Times tells us that she feels really bad about it, for whatever that means. And people can also recall that while she was head of the California State Attorney General's office, over 1,000 people were locked up for smoking marijuana. She presided over jailing a lot of people. And on top of that, the drug labs in the state of California that were being used by the police were turning up false positive results. And yet Kamala Harris's office did not tell the defense attorneys or the judges about this. They knew that the drug labs were turning over false positives, and people went to prison because her office concealed that their drug labs were turning up false positives. And another thing about Kamala Harris, I don't know if people saw, but there's a video of Kamala Harris where she's bragging about how she jailed the parents of children who were truant from school.
I would not be standing here were it not for the education I received. And I know many of us will say the same thing. And I believe a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So I decided I was going to start prosecuting parents for truancy. Well, this was a little controversial in San Francisco. And frankly, my staff went bananas. They were very concerned because we didn't know at the time whether I was going to have an opponent in my re-election race. But I said, look, I'm done. This is a serious issue, and I've got a little political capital, and I'm going to spend some of it.
Have you seen the clip? And she gets up there, and it's the same kind of thing. She's giggling. Yes, I had the idea that we could lock up parents who are truant from school. You know, I wouldn't be anywhere in my life if it weren't for my education. And so not giving a child their education is a crime. And so I jailed parents, and she's giggling about it. It's just so great. And, you know, I see so much in U.S. media. They like to trivialize incarceration. There's so many shows on Netflix and all of that where it ends towards the end where someone goes to jail, but it's part of the happy ending. It's okay. And they don't seem to realize what that means. You know, when one member of a family, when a father or a mother goes to prison, or a brother or a sister, it hurts the entire family. And when Kamala Harris is up there giggling about, oh, you know, I locked up these parents because their kids weren't in school. You know, yeah, kids need to be in school. When kids aren't getting to school, it's a problem. But the worst thing you could do is then throw their parents in jail. That's not going to help the situation in any conceivable way. But when she's joking about it, and she's laughing about it, Kamala Harris, she says, what did she say? She said, well, I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for my education. It's about her. The big line when she was calling out Joe Biden, when she was trying to contend with Joe Biden in the presidential election, what did she shout at Joe Biden? She shouted, that little girl was me!
You know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me.
And then her campaign started churning out T-shirts with the face of 10-year-old Kamala Harris on them. Do you remember this? Yes. It's almost like she wants us to vote for her because she was once a 10-year-old child. I mean, that's what it sounds like. What's particularly interesting is, you know, you remember when Barack Obama was running for president. We knew everything about Barack Obama. We knew all about Barack Obama's pastor. We knew about Barack Obama's father from Kenya. We knew the school he went to in Indonesia. But Kamala Harris, barely anybody knows anything about Kamala Harris. Well, Kamala Harris's mother, who's now deceased, was from India, was a cancer researcher. And Kamala Harris's father, Donald Harris, was a Marxist economist, and is a Marxist economist, a professor at Stanford University. He was an advisor to the government of Michael Manley in Jamaica, and he and Kamala are estranged from one another. He did not attend Kamala's inauguration as vice president. They're not on good speaking terms. But the more you look at it, it's very clear that Kamala Harris sees herself as a victim. The way Kamala Harris speaks, the world has been unfair to her. And she blames Donald Harris for that to some degree or other. We don't know why. We also, there's rumors, we don't really know what happened when she was in Quebec. We just know she never talks about the years that she spent in Quebec. But Kamala Harris thinks that she is a victim. And she wants the whole world to know that that little girl was her. And she wants vengeance. And she wants to make people pay. And she wanted to make Kevin Cooper pay. And she wanted to make those parents pay. That's what leftism is if it's stripped of economics. If it's stripped of class struggle, if it's stripped of a desire to have the people rise up and control the means of production, if it's just anger, if it's just revenge, it's just a call for destruction, a call for rebellion, that's what Kamala Harris is. Kamala Harris, she's very much a guillotine meme. That's what she is. It's the glorification of punishment, a desire for revenge, a desire for destruction. And that if you look at the history of socialism around the world, the strength of socialism wasn't the guillotines, it wasn't the firing squads, it wasn't the persecution. That's not what people remember the strength of socialism being. They just did a poll. 75% of Russians say that the Soviet Union was the best time in their history, but they're not thinking that because of executions. This was from a PBS documentary. They interviewed a woman named Tatiana Fedorova.
Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How was it possible at one of the most difficult times to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol.
And the reason Stalin remains wildly popular in Russia, it's not because he executed people, it's because he mobilized them to build that country up from nothing. This was a country... He built some of the world's largest power plants, he wiped out illiteracy, and he built a modern industrial country. He raised millions of people up out of poverty. And then they fought off the Nazi invaders, and then they rebuilt the country again, and a few years later they were the first country in outer space. And the strength of socialism was not that it punished people and that it persecuted people, but rather that it enabled people to go out and build and construct. I've said to many people, I'm not a socialist because I want to destroy America. I'm a socialist because I want to save America. And we have to save America from the horrors that are being unfolded by an irrational system where profits come before people. I want to save America. I want to build a better world. If all the apparatus they've created for destroying people, for imprisoning people, for breaking people psychologically, could be utilized to build and to construct, the popular power were put in control of the means of production and control of the state apparatus of the United States, we could build something very, very beautiful.
They want you to be mad at Russia and China instead of the looters that are sitting not very far from here off Wall Street, who are actively getting bailouts in the billions, arguably even in the trillions, for their gambling debts. That's what we're here against, and that's why we're taking a stand for freedom of speech, because they're going after the Yahoo movement and anyone who stands against the imperialists, because they know we're a real threat and that's rising. They know we authentically represent the American people. They know that the American people are ready for a change and ready for an end to the wars. And that's why they're cracking down on our First Amendment. They're cracking down on our Fourth Amendment. They're cracking down on all of the civil liberties we know and love.
All right. All right, everybody. Let's do our roll call, and then I'll answer questions. Names and locations, names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Who's with us? Names and locations, names and locations. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. John McCarthy in Chicago. Lawrence Johnson in Chicago. Bob in Troy, New York. John in Honolulu. Salt Lake City, Utah. Dustin Schlesinger in Cleveland, Ohio. Jenny in Cincinnati. Welcome. Lexington. Randall Wilson. Chris in Salt Lake City. John from Atlantic, Canada. Juan from Tucker, Georgia. Lake Isabella, California. David Crow, a.k.a. The Van. Chad in Spokane, Washington. Denver, Colorado. Grange, Oversands, UK. Utah, Trevor. Johnny Jones in North Carolina. Vince in New Hampshire. Alex in Brazil. Anthony, Detroit. Sherry in Cape May. Charles Dominic Williams of Malta. Balthazar in Oakland. Dan Keating in New Jersey. Mariah in North Carolina. Claudia in Adelaide, Australia. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Very, very good. Alan Rice from South Korea. Welcome, 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 everybody. Names and locations. Chicago, by the way, I got an ad of Kamala before watching this. Yeah, I've been getting Kamala ads like crazy, too. It's not just you. James Turner in Boise, Idaho. Welcome, James Turner. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All righty. All righty. Now I've got 4 super chats and 1 Rumble rant. So I will answer those. Oh, Gary Curtis in Indiana, Patch in Arizona. I will answer those, but please keep in mind that sending super chats is not only a way to support, to give me something to talk about here in the second half of our show, It's also a way to support the work that I do. I live in New York City where the rent is too damn high. I've got an extra room so I can do these streams every night. And I got a home studio, and it's quite expensive living where I live in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. So anything you can do to help with a super chat would be appreciated. And if you want to have a PDF of the book sent to you, I will send it to anybody if you just Cash App $10 to Caleb Moppin 22. And include your email. I will send you the PDF of the book. That is my arrangement. So, that is my arrangement there. And if you send a super chat or a Rumble rant, that supports the work that we're doing here. Anyway, let's start answering things. Obama's past was an asset, but Kamala's is ignored. Well, see, this is where it gets weird. The divisions in the ruling class had not fully solidified to the point that they are now at the time that Barack Obama was running for president. Barack Obama was running for president largely to repudiate the neoconservatives. The rise of Bolivarian socialism in Latin America, the defeat of Israel at the hands of Hezbollah in 2006, all of that had created a situation where the United States really needed to kind of reinvent its image. The neocons had alienated Europe, and Barack Obama was running for president basically on a platform of I will reestablish relationships with Muslims who Bush burned. I will reestablish relations with Europe, and I will help, depolarize Latin America and get people in Latin America that are indigenous and dark skinned to not hate the United States as much. And I am going to reset the image of the United States. The cowboy Bush thing is not going to work. And so the campaign against Barack Obama when he first ran for president was largely he's not neoconservative enough and he doesn't believe in free market capitalism enough. And in all the hits on him, they got things exactly wrong. You know who wrote a really good book about Barack Obama that I really thought was great was Wayne Madsen. Wayne Madsen is a journalist, kind of an anti-establishment journalist, and he wrote this book called The Manufacturing of a President. One thing it talks about is Barack Obama lived in Indonesia while there was a genocide going on against ethnically Chinese people. Right? The CIA overthrew the Indonesian government, installed a military dictatorship that started just killing communists, and then it just started exterminating ethnically Chinese people. And that's a scandal, isn't it? Right? That a brutal coup comes in, they install a brutal military dictatorship, and Barack Obama's living there, and his stepfather is a military guy who's helping commit genocide against ethnically Chinese people. That's a big deal. However, the story in mainstream American media was that when Barack Obama lived in Indonesia, which is a Muslim country, he went to an Indonesian public school, and at that public school, they taught him Islam. And that was the whole thing. Barack Obama went to a, quote, radical Muslim school. It was so dumb. It's like Indonesia is a Muslim country. The military had just toppled the government. The military was pushing religion very hard. So, like, what school was he going to go to? I mean, were they going to send him to the Catholic school? You couldn't have one of those. And his dad was a Muslim guy in the military. So, it's like he went to a Muslim school. Okay. But it was like in a US-backed military dictatorship that was very anti-communist. It's like, they want you to like, oh my God, a Muslim school. He must be a terrorist. It's like, that was very, very dumb. The other thing, they made a big deal out of the fact that he attended Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church. Well, that was a very well-respected, important church in Chicago, right? I mean, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, Oprah went to that church. A lot of wealthy people went to that church. The more important story is that Barack Obama spent most of his early adult life acting as an operative of the Ford Foundation and of George Soros and of the Democratic Party's NGO apparatus, manipulating, spying on, and working against Black nationalists. Right? I mean, that's, in Chicago, there is a very big Black nationalist apparatus. Minister Farrakhan, who is a very anti-imperialist, is located in Chicago. You know, and that, you know, I mean, there's a whole history. I mean, Fred Hampton, the Black Panther leader, was murdered in Chicago, and that there are a lot of Black revolutionary organizations and stuff in Chicago. There's a very big Black activist movement in Chicago. And Barack Obama went around those circles as an agent of the Ford Foundation, as an agent of MoveOn.org and Saul Alinsky, you know, the Alinsky community organizing apparatus, basically manipulating those circles and working against Black radicals. And in fact, you know, when Barack Obama first ran for office, he ran against a former Black Panther, Bobby Rush, right? Bobby Rush was a former Black Panther who, you know, he was a leader of the Black Panthers who eventually just became a Democrat. And Barack Obama ran against him from the right. And the idea that Bobby Rush was too radical, Bobby Rush was this communist radical, and he ran against him from the right. And then when Barack Obama first got elected, I mean, Barack Obama was very much an establishment shill, an establishment plant who went around the Black movement in Chicago trying to manipulate it. So the idea that, oh my God, he went to Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church, he must be this radical communist. No. Barack Obama spent his entire 20s manipulating and infiltrating Black organizations. And, oh, you know, he went to school in Indonesia. You know, he must be a radical Muslim. No, his father was part of a US-backed military regime that overthrew a communist, Sukarno, and installed a brutal military dictatorship. And it was in a Muslim country, and he went to a public school in a Muslim country. It wasn't even a private school. So, I mean, you know, they just missed the boat, right? There was a story in both of those places. It's actually very good that Wayne Madsen tells in Manufacturing of a President. And there's not a story in he went to a radical Muslim school and he went to Reverend Jeremiah Wright's church. So they missed the boat on both of the stories, but they at least talked about it. With Kamala Harris, they don't talk about anything. Once upon a time, Kamala Harris was a very cute, adorable Black girl, and now she's vice president, and she's going to be a great president. Vote for her. That's the message. That's the message. And look, let me just put this out there, okay? And I've got more super chats to answer, and I will answer them, but let me just throw this out there. This needs to be said, okay? One argument that gets made is that people say, well, look, she's a woman of color. And they made this argument with Barack Obama, man of color, right? Isn't it great that every Black child can grow up thinking they could be president? Psychologically, it's just so amazing and motivating, right? And they might say the same thing for young women of color, right? Isn't it great that they could grow up thinking they could be president? Look, I'm not going to denigrate that and all of that, but I'm just telling you, right? One thing I did not talk about in this book because I didn't want to go there. Folks, Kamala Harris has a little bit of a nickname, and it refers to a piece of protective gear one could wear, right? Kamala Harris is widely accused of having rose up the ranks in California politics, not by her skills as an attorney. And she was the mistress of Willie Brown, the California politician. He was married, and she was his married lover, right? She was his mistress, right? And you know, here is young Kamala Harris when she was the arm candy of then married California politician Willie Brown. I'll just put the image on the screen, right? I mean, this is, this is how Kamala Harris rose up the ranks of politics. She was the arm candy and a few other things to Willie Brown. And, if that's what you think a great example for your daughter to be is that what you want your daughter to be? Is that's basically, people are going to look at her life story and, I mean, is this the great example you want to have for your daughter, for your child? Be like Kamala Harris, be that. Think about that. I can't tell you, look, I'm a white man. I've never been female. I've never been a person of color, so I can't tell you how to feel, but look at Kamala Harris's career trajectory. Do you really want your daughter to think, oh, wow, I can be a successful person. I'll follow the career path of Kamala? No. No. Little known fact about Willie Brown. The way he became a powerful political figure in San Francisco was by representing pimps and prostitutes. He was known as the pimp lawyer, which basically, if any pimp or prostitute was ever arrested in the city of San Francisco in the Bay Area, they would hire Willie Brown. And for some reason, the judges would always let them off. He could get any pimp or prostitute acquitted. And many people look at that and are saying, organized crime, human trafficking, inside connections. I don't know what was going on with that. That is a true story. That is how Willie Brown became famous. He was the very effective legal representative of pimps and prostitutes all over the Bay Area. And I don't think it was just because he was such a good orator. He just knew how to argue defense for those people so well. I think there's something more to that story, if you know what I'm saying. Kamala Harris, the great feminist, the great icon for young women to aspire to be like. He was married. He had a wife. But Willie, also had a girlfriend. And her name was Kamala. I mean, is this what you want your daughter to grow up and aspire to be? You can answer that. But, I guess I probably said too much about that. It's not for me to say, but it's just, the idea of Kamala Harris being a great example of women's empowerment or a role model for young women. Are you serious? Are you serious? Seriously. Anyway, but that's for you to say. I don't have children. I'm not female. I'm a man and I'm a white dude. So you can decide, but the idea that Kamala Harris, oh boy. Anyway, next question. Why is Poland so anti-communist? It depends where you go. Some regions are more sympathetic, but largely the Polish nationalist government has, played into the idea that Poland's problems today are because of Russia and the Soviet Union. And that there has long been a religious divide between the Polish people and the Russian people. The Russian people are Eastern Orthodox. The Polish people are Roman Catholic. And so there's an ethnic religious divide. Zbigniew Brzezinski, he was a Polish Catholic, and he hated Russians. He didn't hate communists. He hated Russians. And because those Russian Eastern Orthodox people were threatening the Catholic Church, there is a big difference, division in Eastern Europe between Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox people. And I don't know the intricacies of that and how it plays out, but there is a very big division, and that plays out in Yugoslavia, in the former Yugoslavia, and other places. I know a lot of Polish Catholics really don't like Eastern Orthodox Russians, but there are parts of Poland where Russia is very popular, where the Soviet Union is very popular. It just depends, right? They're not all Polish, just like there's people in America that are anti-imperialist, right? It's complicated. There was, and that there's many people in Poland say life was better when Poland was a socialist country, but there is a long-standing ethnic division between Poles and Russians. That's true. All righty. All right. Now, folks, I made a video years ago called Why Kamala Harris is Dangerous. And that video is a little out of date. But in that video, one thing I said, imagine that you're at a communist gathering or socialist gathering, and all of a sudden the FBI storms in. That's how I started the video, right? The FBI storms in and arrests everybody. That's what will happen if Kamala Harris is president, is what I said in the video. Well, now, we haven't waited for her to be president. This is what happened when Kamala Harris was vice president. A socialist and communist group, a black socialist and communist group in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, got their homes raided by the FBI, drones flown into their homes. Tucker Carlson is supporting them. They're facing 15 years in prison. You need to know about the Uhuru movement. So I'm just going to put this clip on. You have to see this.
After the rioting was done, U.S. media kind of forgot about those communities. Well, Uhuru, they went out there because they saw black and brown people like themselves that were out there protesting and rioting, and they stayed there. And they've been there since 2014, providing services in the community, giving these young people in the community something constructive to do, not just go out and break shit to raise awareness about the conditions they're in, but ways to actually feed people and serve the community. And they've been there in St. Louis since 2014 doing constructive work. They have really escalated these programs. They have a farmer's market. They provide classes and services to pregnant mothers, and in particular in St. Louis, Missouri, and in St. Petersburg, Florida. They're trying to undo the damage that the U.S. Department of Justice and the state police and the local police and all the forces have been doing in communities like Ferguson, Missouri. And at the same time that they've done this community work, the African People's Socialist Party has also taken a firm anti-imperialist stance. They support China. They support Russia. They support Cuba. They support Iran. And when the United States started piling weapons into Kiev, they defended Russia's right to intervene.
This defensive war in Ukraine that Russia is actually waging against world colonial powers, not Ukraine as a single entity, but the U.S. and all colonial powers who have an interest in colonially dominating African people right here in this country and around the world and extracting resources from the majority of peoples on the planet. That system, this current system, is in severe crisis, and they cannot rule in the same old way.
Because of that, their homes were raided. Then months later, the federal government came out with an indictment, and it's charging them with being Russian agents. And it's trying to allege that the election campaign that they ran in St. Petersburg, Florida, was somehow interference in the U.S. electoral process.
4 activists associated with the People's Democratic Uhuru Movement and the African People's Socialist Party have been indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice. The indictment from the U.S. Department of Justice accuses them of spreading Russian propaganda and cites simply some web conferences that they had, some Zoom meetings, some emails they sent out, as well as the fact that they have run routine election campaigns. Is this of concern to the Secretary General as an attack on human rights, freedom of assembly, etc.?
I frankly was not aware of the case before you mentioned it. Let me look into it, and I will get back to you.
What's going on in Africa is directly connected to what's going on here. What's going on in Ukraine is connected to what's going on in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? It's an international, global economy that's all connected.
Because they go to conferences in Russia, this constitutes Russian meddling in the elections. The whole thing is ridiculous. It's completely, utterly ridiculous. They've been running these campaigns for years, since before I was born. Back in the 1970s, they were running people for office. Their platform of reparations, I mean, Marianne Williamson, she's a major Democrat candidate. She also says she believes in reparations. I mean, it's not a unique message that they have in that sense, but they have been targeted because they're doing what you're supposed to do. I mean, you know, at all of our meetings, we have a picture of Fred Hampton up on the stage because Fred Hampton, he built a free breakfast program. He organized what he called a rainbow coalition, uniting low-income people, white, black, brown, Arab, Latino, into one organization, you know, trying to build up community empowerment, trying to do community service projects while teaching Marxism and socialism. You know, we look at Fred Hampton as a great example of the American revolutionary tradition. And, you know, the African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, you know, they don't like that we wave the American flag. They don't like that we consider ourselves patriotic. They have their own kind of unique analysis. They talk about what they call the colonial mode of production. That's not traditional Marxist thinking. And we don't agree with them on a number of issues. But it doesn't matter. We support them.
We all have to stand up and oppose the ideology of division and support an ideology of unity based upon our material interests, you know what I'm saying, to work together.
People who can't understand that, people who can't get past, you know, this or that, like, we got to put aside our differences and say that if they come for them, they come for all of us. If they go after them, they got to deal with all of us. That needs to be the attitude among anti-imperialists.
All right. So, you know, hey, I think I'm doing a great thing here with Kamala. I'm going to go on some shows to talk about my book. Got an interview lined up for tomorrow. You know, I think that I think I'm doing a good thing here. But I will also say this, right? I'm just throwing this out here. I'm trying not to get too excited about the social media buzz I got. You know, look, it's great. I'm glad that I'm getting some play out of this. I'm glad I'm going to get some interviews. But really all that matters is building our organization. building our in real life organization. That's what matters. And you know what? I've been canceled a million times. And if this really gets a lot of traction, I'm going to get canceled some more. Right. And you know what they've done to me. You've seen probably what they've said about me and all of that. And there'll be more of that. There'll be a lot more of that. You can expect that. So, I hope that this book blows up because I hope that, people are outraged about the fact that Amazon banned it. And then based on that, they read it, and I hope it gets a lot of attention among Trump supporters, among others, but at the end of the day, I'm not betting on social media. I'm betting on building our organization, right? And we have, like I said before, we have our morning messages every morning on the CPI YouTube channel. We've got that, and that's every morning. You can listen to a hopeful message from CPI members. We got the morning message for tomorrow. I got a link to it. If you want to submit a morning message to our community, right? You now have the ability, if you can think of an inspiring message, to help empower people, etc. We do have this option where you can create a morning message. You can submit it to CPI. So if you want to make a morning message, you can submit a morning message here. Our community, that's what matters. Keeping our group of people together, our anti-imperialist community of optimistic, constructive innovationists. That's what we need. That's what I hope that you will do. Please join the Center for Political Innovation. We need more members. While we're at it, there's a great petition you can sign. We are against any sanctions that affect access to healthcare. And so one of our members has put together a great petition to end all sanctions that impact people's ability to get healthcare. I'm putting the link in the various chats, so you can do that as well. You can sign that petition. There's that as well. I see there is a Rumble rant. It says, do you think it's common for Amazon to suppress dissent and criticism of elected officials? NAFAL trolls used Amazon to do financial harm to authors. That's interesting. I thought I wasn't aware that NAFO had done that. I'm not aware of a lot of books being removed from Amazon. So I'm not surprised, but Amazon, there's certain books they have banned, there's been a lot of censorship, but generally, I'm not surprised, but I'm not giving up. I'm not surrendering. I'm not backing down because I believe in what I'm doing. And, look, and this book is available on Lulu. Go and order it from Lulu. That's all I'll say. Go and order it from Lulu. It's available from Lulu. You can buy it from Lulu. All my other books are still on Amazon. They haven't been removed. I'm not backing down, and I just continue to do what I do. And my life is dedicated to building a real organization. I'm not trying to get, sucked into social media, right? Because social media, it is what it is. I'm glad I'm getting a little play. I'm glad some people will read this book and learn from it. And I'm happy to do some interviews, go on some shows. I'm glad some doors were open for me and some people were posting about my book, etc. That's great, but I'm not getting sucked into this social media trap anymore, right? Social media is rigged. Social media is rigged. Social media is rigged. And what I care about is building my community and building our organization. The Center for Political Innovation, our group, we are the future, right? The future is not online. The future is organizing in communities and building communities of people who rely on each other and understand anti-imperialism. So, that's what I'm all about. But I'll keep answering questions. Super chats are always appreciated.
masses! To the masses! To the masses! To the masses! Dare to win! Dare to win! Dare to win! Dare to win!
Yep, that's us. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All righty, Maduro voted out. Is that going to happen? I mean, I don't know. I think Maduro's in a pretty secure spot. He's very popular. But they may. I mean, I think Bolivarian socialism is very secure. I mean, maybe Maduro wants to retire. I don't know, but I haven't seen that. She's being used by the establishment, and then some. She represents the most dangerous wing of the establishment. Anne Marie Slaughter, the new American security agency. I mean, this is something to be aware of, right? And this I saw as well, John, and this disturbs me as well, because they're playing up this idea that Kamala is going to save the Palestinians. Kamala is completely owned by the Israel lobby. I did an interview with Paul LaRudy, who has been a long-time Palestine activist in the Bay Area, and he talked about how Kamala Harris had no interest in anything to do with the Palestinians. She's completely owned by the Israel lobby, and her husband is a huge Zionist and a huge supporter of Israel. And I mean, she's completely pro-Israel. And the idea that, Kamala is going to be supporting the Palestine protesters or something, that's a joke. That is a sick joke, right? Kamala is more regime change oriented than Biden is, and Biden didn't slow down Israel one bit. Not one bit did Biden slow down the Israelis. So don't even think about it. That is, again, they are so good at manipulating people. No, Kamala Harris doesn't work for China, right? And no, Kamala Harris is not pro-Palestine. And this is where conservatives, this is what they're going to do. I think Trump has got this election in the bag. I think Trump is going to win by a long shot. So long that they won't be able to steal it from him. They'll have to let him win. And so they're going to try to play up the bad part of Trumpism. They're going to play up the notion that Trump's anti-establishment side is against China, and that China is in a conspiracy with Kamala Harris, or that that Trump's anti-establishment side is with Israel, and the Palestinians are all working for Kamala Harris. And don't buy it. Don't buy it, right? And that's the way these people are. They light a fire and they pee it out. They created woke, and now they're going to try and take control of anti-woke, right? They created woke because the black community was ready to fight back, because the black community wanted to resist, and so they co-opted it with woke. And now they're creating anti-woke to co-opt, people's opposition to woke. And this is how they try to own every side. So there you go. Ho, ho, ho. Nothing wrong with being one. Took me a minute there, Gala. But wish we had people with better integrity and values in government. Kamala has none, a Clinton protege from what I heard. Obama is to force her out during the convention per rumors. I sure hope that happens. We'll be safer with anybody but her. Kamala Harris is the most dangerous. This is not a partisan thing. Right? I mean, this isn't about me hating Democrats. Kamala Harris is the most dangerous person who has ever been close to being president of the United States. Ever. Okay? She is the most dangerous potential presidential candidate in history. There has never been somebody who is so psychologically damaged and so vengeful and willing to harm other people, so indifferent to the suffering that they might cause. Kamala Harris is a basket case. She is a psychologically damaged basket case. She is a bloodthirsty, revenge-hungry psycho. And there is no way that she should be president. I mean, they used to talk about yellow dog Democrats who'd vote for a yellow dog as long as he was a Democrat. I would vote for a yellow dog as long as it wasn't Kamala. Right? Kamala Harris is the most dangerous candidate that has ever been. And it's I'm not exaggerating. I am telling you the absolute truth. If you read my book and you learn who Kamala Harris really is, you will know. You will know. And my book is already online. Link below. It's on Lulu. You can buy it on Lulu. It's not on Amazon anymore, but a version of it with a generic cover is on lulu.com. There's a link below. You can order my book. It's on Lulu. And if you want the ebook version, if you want the PDF, all you have to do is send me, $10 on Cash App. Cash App me $10. Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App, and I will email you the PDF. And that is, my book is getting out there, and I'm going to be on some shows this week. It's wild that Amazon banned it when they did. Everything was fine with the book for 4 years. 4 years this book has been in circulation, but suddenly they just found something wrong with it. And then they said the issue was the cover, but then I took the cover off and they still wouldn't restore it. So this is very clearly a political thing. Max Blumenthal suspects that this came from the White House because that's how a lot of COVID-related material was removed. It was a direct call from the White House. And that's probably what happened, honestly. I know that Kamala Harris's staff has a copy of this book. That then in the vice president's office somewhere, they have one of these. By the way, if you have one of these original editions, you have a collector's item, right? So consider yourself lucky because, if you have one of these original editions, you are very much a lucky person. And my attitude, folks, and thank you, Gala, thank you. And, I hope what you're saying about Obama is correct, but, but I think we should milk this for all it's worth. If you've got one of these, make a video, take a selfie with it, let's milk this for all it's worth. Right? Seriously, let's milk this for all it's worth. Take a selfie with this, make a video talking about how it's bullshit that it was removed. I will retweet your video and you'll get more followers. Let's milk this for all it's worth. Why not? Right? I mean, what do we have to lose? Right? I mean, seriously, if you have one of these, make a video of yourself with it or take a picture of yourself with it or something, and I'll promote you. I'll tweet you out. I'll make you more famous. Right? I don't want us to get all caught up in the social media thing. I think the social media thing is a little bit, it's a bit of a trap, but milk it, right? I mean, why not? Let's get what we can, right? I'm going on some shows, some good shows. I got an interview tomorrow on a good show, going on another show on Sunday. It looks like another show is fingers crossed, not guaranteed yet. And another show, like 3 Trumper podcasts reached out to me today. I mean, let's milk it. Right. Let's take this for the win. Right. And you all know that any money I make off of this and then some is going to go back into CPI. You all know that. Right. I mean, the amount of my personal resources and stuff that I pour into the Center for Political Innovation is massive. So, yes, I have my life. I have a wife to take care of and I have my life. But, a lot of this, whatever I make from this, a lot of it is going to go back into CPI. Obviously, I have my own expenses in my own life. But, I mean, CPI is my life, and I stay up late at night thinking about CPI, and I'm obsessed with CPI growing, so much so that certain people have quit CPI because they can't stand that I'm so obsessed with it growing. Well, I'm not making you do anything, but anyway, let's milk it. Let's milk it, right? Let's milk it for all it's worth. Let's get this book into the Trump universe, into where it belongs. Let's make everybody, let's make them regret censoring this book, right? And look, I don't know what could happen, folks. I honestly, I'm saying bring it on, right? I know no Russian had anything to do with this book. As I said before, if I had told my Russian friends that I was doing this, they would have tried to stop me. I can almost guarantee you that. Nobody at RT approved this or had anything to do with this book. This book has nothing to do with RT, except that I wrote it and I work at RT. That's it. And it was 4 years ago when RT America still existed. And I wrote this and I did not talk to my employers about it. I just did it. But hey, who knows? Maybe Kamala, that would be awesome. Maybe Kamala will wave this around in a speech and say, oh, there's a Russian conspiracy against me. Caleb Moppin, who talked to Putin, did this. Bring it on, Kamala, bring it on. I can guarantee under oath that no Russian had anything to do with the book. No Chinese person had anything to do with the book. No Cubans had anything to do with the book. No Iranians had anything to do with the book. I wrote the book of my own free will because I did the research. after talking to somebody that I work with, another American who I met at RT, who told me about the work they had done with Kamala Harris. I did the research. I wrote the book. You know, and I'm proud of the book, and I honestly think it's one of my best pieces. So I'll take it. You know, I'll take it and bring it on. Right? Yeah. The problem is obviously not with the cover, because they won't let me republish it with a blank cover. So, you know, and like I said, everything that I wrote in this book is way more true than I thought. All the things that have come out of her office and all of that. So, yeah, bring it on. That's what I say. Bring it on. I'm proud of the work that I do, and I want to emphasize I could not do it without all of you. I could not do it without all of you. You all keep me going through the hard times. You all have stayed with me as they've tried to smear me, and they may do that again, right? You know the cards they've played against me, right? That's the other thing. I mean, look, I'm getting boosted now. I'm getting a boost. But who knows what could happen, right? And if this really blows up, I mean, who knows? If this really blows up, you know what they will bring up in their rebuttal. You know what they'll say about me. I don't care. So what? You know where they'll go, and you know how down and dirty these people are. But you all have stood with me through lots of smears and lots of attacks and all of that, because you all are awesome. And you know what? I appreciate that about all of you, and that you all have withstood the test. You all have withstood the test of time. You all have withstood the attacks. And I appreciate that. And we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep going, and we're not going to surrender. We're never going to back down. We're never going to surrender, because we believe in this. Anti-imperialism and innovationism is the future. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All right, folks. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back tomorrow night. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And thank you, John. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. And yeah, we are in it to win it, and we never back down. You can order it on Lulu down below. There we go.